Hey guys, Jason here from WàVTECH, and on today's workshop, we're going to show you how to set up the bassRESTOR. So what exactly does the bassRESTOR do? Well, it's actually really three things. First, it's a true preamp. So that means that you can take any signal in and get a strong signal out because it's also a line driver. It can take speaker level input as well as RCA line level input and boost that up to over 10 volts RMS, which allows you to turn the gains on your amplifier all the way down and get maximum signal noise and sound performance. Secondly, it's a bass restoration processor. That means that it allows you to restore bass and music content that's not there, older 80s rock and roll music, band music, things like that that don't have much bass in it. It allows you to take the upper bass frequencies, shift those down, boost them up, and get incredible low bass, even with music content that has no bass. As well as it allows you to correct for bass roll-off and frequency response issues from whatever source that you're tapping into. So the first thing with any installation, when you're installing a preamp, line driver, LOC, you need to determine what you have to work with. And so you need to determine what the maximum volume of the radio, of your factory radio or aftermarket radio is before it clips, before the sound becomes distorted. So that's the maximum clean volume you can set the radio to before the sound becomes distorted and bad. So I'm going to show you here over on the bench how to do that real quick, and then we'll get on into making the settings. So with any factory radio, for example, you're going to be tapping into the speaker level outputs, and every radio is going to have a volume point on the master volume on the factory radio where the output starts to become distorted. That's going to be your maximum signal level that's clean. And so that's the first thing we want to find. Now I'm showing this with test equipment here, but you can actually do this pretty easily by ear. Listening to your factory speakers, start turning up the radio until you start hearing distortion. Now in the RTA, you can already see the artifacts, the harmonic artifacts coming up. I'm just playing a test tone in the middle of the frequency range. This is a 1 kilohertz test tone, but you can also use music. So as I turn it up, you can see the artifacts coming up, and they're right at about volume 21 on this aftermarket radio is where the speaker level outputs start to distort severely. And definitely you're going to hear that when the waveform is being squared off. So that's the high level input. And so then I'm going to show you what it is on the low level output of this radio at that clipping point. Okay, so now we've got the low level, the RCA line out coming from this radio, and this radio has 4 volt pre-outs. However, when we get up to that volume 21, the main speaker outputs start clipping. So that's really your maximum effective volume if you're going to use this radio as a deck and 4 plus aftermarket subwoofer add-on. So that's where the bassRESTOR and all of our line drivers for that matter come into play, where you can boost that signal up to reach maximum volume at the same point, because as you can see, it's only half a volt out of a 4 volt RCA at volume 21. Now I can keep turning up the RCA output and it'll keep going up, but the main speakers distort really badly. So that's where this comes into play as a line driver for any aftermarket output that you're going to use the main 4 channels of power built in. If you're going to amplify everything, it's still going to be an advantage because you're going to get maximum signal and noise, and you'll be able to turn the gains in your amp all the way down and get tremendous bass output. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is do all the initial settings on your amplifier and on the bassRESTOR. Now, all of our products are line drivers, so the first thing I recommend you always do is turn the amplifier's gain all the way down, because this is a line driver, and it's going to be able to drive that amplifier to full output, even with its gain all the way down. Next thing is, if most bass amplifiers, almost all bass amplifiers have a low pass crossover. So set that approximately where you think it's going to be. Good place to start is 80 hertz. And then we get to, once that's all set, amplifier is set, we get to the bassRESTOR. So the first thing is set your subsonic filter to approximately where you think it needs to be. If it's a tuned enclosure, it's about a half octave down from the tuning frequency. Sealed enclosure, right around 20 hertz. So about 9 o'clock or so is a good place to start with that. And now we're going to find your initial gain setting. We're going to turn up. So the radio's at its maximum unclipped volume right now, undistorted output, and we're going to play music, and we're going to start turning up the gain on the bassRESTOR until your speaker, your subwoofer in this case, because you're powering your main speakers with the main radio, until your subwoofer reaches the maximum output or the amplifier is clipping or both. And that's generally going to be somewhere around the 9 to 10 o'clock position on any of our processors here. So with that set, now we can get into the tuning portion. So the next thing, after your gains are set and you've reached the maximum output capability of your amplifier at the maximum clean volume of your radio, is to set the initial settings on the bass restoration effect. Now I'm showing here an output that is actually already high passed from the factory radio. This can also represent music that doesn't have much bass content in it. And so make sure when you're doing, of course, the gain setting as well as all these, that these two knobs are turned all the way up. This remote actually has 3 functions built into it. It is a master volume here, so I can turn the master volume or the sub level up or down. It has the effect knob, but that only works when I turn the effect on. And then it has turn the effect on and off. So we're going to do so we did all those previous settings with the effect off, and now we're going to use the effect. So starting with the effect down on the main unit, this is the effect limiter that can go up to the maximum setting on this knob. So I'm going to turn on the effect, red light comes on, and now we're going to start increasing the effect on the main unit. And you can see right away it already took out that bass roll off. So depending on where that bass roll off is or the music content that you have, you're going to be setting the width to either narrow, which is only going to affect a narrow band of frequencies. You can kind of think of it like a parametric EQ, but it doesn't really work that way. But it's going to affect a narrow, medium, or wide bandwidth of frequencies. The frequency center, the frequency adjustment, is where the center of those affected frequencies are. So let me turn this up a little bit more so you can get an idea of how much more boost you can get into this, up to 18 dB actually. So if I turn the frequency up, you can see the frequency is shifting up. If I turn it down, you can see it going down. Generally, I recommend that you start with the effect, the width, and the frequency all at about 11 o'clock. So that would mean just a little bit less than medium on the effect, a little bit below medium on the width, and a little bit below 50 hertz on the frequency. Now, if you have a severe bass roll off, you're going to want to go wider and set the frequency lower to compensate. So you want to put the center frequency down low and lift up a broad band of frequencies. If you're going to augment your music primarily and you have a flat frequency response, you're going to want to just put it to where you think that sounds best, which is usually right around the 40 hertz range or so, and the width in a just below medium or so. If you go narrow, you're going to have a much narrower effect. And it's, if you want just more punch, but you don't want a lot of low bass, then that would be the way to go. So after you make all these initial settings, you're going to want to go back and readjust for various types of music. So the initial settings you're doing to set your gain is typical music that has plenty of bass. It's not lacking in a lot of bass. So that's what you're going to be listening to primarily when the bass restoration is turned off. Now, when you listen to music where you want it augmented or you want it augmented all the time, when you turn that on, that's going to boost a lot of that low bass frequency. So you're going to want to go back and readjust your gain to prevent your amplifier from being overdriven or your sound from being distorted. You may also want to increase the cutoff frequency of your subsonic, to protect your subwoofer from over excursion once you've added in all that bass. And so you listen to bass heavy music, for example, you're not going to need that much bass restoration, if at all, but you can always adjust it down with this outer knob. The advantage of having it on off like this is because you can basically set the effect on the back ring here where you like it most of the time for most of the music you're listening to. And then when something really bass heavy comes along, you can simply turn it off, but you can still use the main knob as a volume control, as a sub level. We have this capability. It's unique to us. We basically reinvented this category about 6-7 years ago by adding this capability of a true line driver and preamp along with bass restoration. So it gives you that ability to turn the effect on and off, but still also use it as a sub-level control. Okay, so one other thing that makes this processor extremely unique is the fact that the bass restoration process can also work on a low-pass signal. So that's a factory low-pass signal or an already low-pass signal coming out of an aftermarket radio or after a DSP. So you already have the bass here. You already have a decent bass response. So you're using this primarily to augment your music, to live remaster older recordings or music that doesn't have a lot of bass with the bassRESTOR. So the settings that you'll have here will be somewhat different than you would have had fixing a factory roll-off or a signal that didn't have all that much bass to begin with, because you've already got quite a bit of bass. But we can just turn the effect on and off, and you're going to want to set this for your music taste. So like I said before, the frequencies that you're going to want is what's most effective in your subwoofer system. You might want to set the frequency a little bit lower, a little bit more narrow if you want that real low bass impact. And then you can just set the effect as high or as low as you want. And just keep in mind, protect your subwoofer always with the subsonic adjusted as needed. And there you go. That's how you can use the bass restoration effect for both a high pass signal or an already low pass signal and still get great bass in any system. So there you have it, guys. That's how you set up the WAVTECH bassRESTOR for whether you have a factory radio with speaker level outputs, full range, or already high passed, or an aftermarket radio or aftermarket DSP that's already low passed. The WAVTECH bassRESTOR works for both of those, to both restore bass that's missing and give you that music content that you really wish those old recordings had in them to begin with. If you need more information, please visit us at our website at wavetech-usa.com.